This is the one in which, ahead of the GOP's potentially humiliating first day in the congressional majority, Ben Shapiro urges Republicans to unite behind the principled platform of simply obstructing Democrats. So please hit that like and subscribe, and enjoy the video. So at the time of this recording, the vote to replace Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House of Representatives is about to take place. And as a recap, in the November midterms, Republicans won the congressional majority. And so as of today, Democrats are officially in the minority. Nancy Pelosi is no longer Speaker. She'll serve out the remainder of her term as a California representative for the next 2 years, but she's no longer part of Democratic leadership. She has ceded her role to her successor, Hakeem Jeffries. Now, on the flip side, this is also the first day of the Republican Party's congressional majority. And the leader of the Republican Party in the House of Representatives, is Kevin McCarthy, who is a spineless loser. But he is the presumptive favorite to replace Pelosi as Speaker of the House. As we've covered in previous videos, McCarthy has faced numerous challenges in his caucus because he's seen, again, as a spineless, unprincipled loser who is reviled by many moderates and certainly by many more members of the Freedom Caucus, which is the far right wing of House Republicans, people like Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene, who actually has broken with the Freedom Caucus to support McCarthy, but we'll get into that. Because he's seen as, insufficiently loyal to Trump. He's seen as being too cooperative with President Biden and the Democrats. So McCarthy's in a rock and a hard place, or in between a rock and a hard place. And the problem is, though Republicans won the congressional majority in the midterms, they didn't win by any substantial margin. Everyone expected it would be a blowout, 20, 30, 40 vote margin. And as a matter of fact, he only has 10 votes. He only has a 10-seat majority. So he can afford very, very few defections, right? He basically needs all hands on deck if he wants to be voted Speaker of the House. And as we've covered in previous videos, that's not looking good so far because he's had to make numerous concessions to wildly disparate political groups to try to get their loyalty. And we'll see what the results are. But right now, the reporting indicates that he's not confident that he's going to win this first round vote, which means if that happens, certainly Republicans are not going to vote for Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic minority leader, to become Speaker because obviously they don't want a Democrat to become Speaker again. But the way the votes may work, enough Republicans may vote for somebody else or whatever to basically reduce McCarthy's majority, and so then they'll have to vote again. And that hasn't happened since 1923, so it'd be the first time in a century that a presumptive speaker has had to go through multiple rounds to become Speaker. And again, it's 12:11 at the time of this recording, so for all I know, McCarthy, got a Hail Mary and he's being voted Speaker, but again, the reporting indicates that that's not good. But that brings us to Ben Shapiro, the Republican thought leader and vaginal moisture skeptic. And he said something really interesting on Twitter earlier today. So he said McCarthy's job as Speaker and the job of the GOP is to say no. That's it, since Democrats control the Senate and the White House. What is the actual policy advanced by stalling him here, other than to hand Democrats a PR win by depicting the House GOP as a clown show? Now, from a realpolitik perspective, Shapiro's right? If I were a Republican or a conservative or I wanted them to win, which obviously I don't, the pragmatic thing to do would be to back McCarthy since it's unlikely that any other Republican could get the speakership, right? Andy Biggs and other representatives, Matt Gaetz, McCarthy's second in command, the House Majority Whip in this case, Steve Scalise, he would probably be the next best option. But McCarthy still has the majority of Republican votes, right? So he's still the favorite. So the pragmatic thing to do would be to unite behind him, which is typically what Republicans do, as we've talked about. The Republicans typically fall in line, whereas Democrats fall in love. But again, we've got an interesting contrast here where Democrats basically have their crap together. They're firing on all cylinders, and they're united behind first Pelosi and now Jeffries, as far as we know. whereas Republicans are seeing dissent. Which is good for Democrats, which is good for liberals, which is good for progressives and the left in general. We like to see Republicans fight amongst themselves. But what's interesting to me is the particular line from Shapiro that says their job is to say no. And this is something that I've talked about in debates and discussions with centrists and other lefties who are just more centrist than I am, about how the political climate and the political ecosystem is so biased towards conservatives. And this actually, believe it or not, this kind of reflects it. Shapiro, who is a very, very popular Republican, mouthpiece, a conservative debater and thought leader. He styles himself as a man of principle and an extremely gifted rhetorician. He's not advocating for a principled stance here. This is a guy who's supposedly driven by religious conviction and political principles, and he's saying basically set that aside. Look, love him or hate him, you need to back McCarthy, because your job, if you're a Republican, is just to say no to the Democrats, to just kick back and say no. And this is really frustrating because there's this idea that a minority party, or I would actually say not even the minority party, because I don't think this expectation goes for Democrats when they're in the minority, but basically for Republicans, when they are in the minority or in the majority, the expectation is that Republicans just don't have to legislate. They don't have to govern. They don't have to help Democrats govern. Their job is basically to maintain the status quo. Their job is to thwart any and all progress, any and all change. So I've compared it before to like the worst partner in a three-legged race, right? In theory, statesmanship would say Republicans and Democrats, even though they have policy disagreements, they should share very similar values, and they should at least attempt to work together, even if it's clumsy, even if it's awkward. Shapiro is dropping all pretense. He's not saying, hey, your job is to work with Democrats wherever possible. He says, you don't even need to try that. Your goal is just to say no. Don't work with Democrats wherever you can. Just say no. Just be a contrarian. Just say no. Just kick back and just prevent Democrats from doing anything. And this has been the prevailing paradigm of the Republican Party for decades, right? We really saw it kick into effect during the Clinton administration, under Newt Gingrich. Mitch McConnell took it to a whole new level under President Obama. And then President Biden has been able to, work with, especially with Senate Republicans, right, on some bipartisan legislation. But Shapiro and others are more about defeating Democrats than they are, advocating for change that they believe in or really advancing a Republican agenda. They would rather deny Democrats than advance a policy platform of their own. And this isn't just Republican politicians. Shapiro is not a sitting member of Congress. He's not a politician. He's a commentator. He's a pundit. And he's very popular. And even he's advocating for this. So it's just really frustrating, and again leans into the idea that the expectation everybody has, particularly on the left and in the center, is Democrats are the one who are obligated. They're the party that's obligated to govern. They're the party that's obligated to clean up messes. They're the party that's obligated to act. Republicans, on the other hand, well, they don't have a constitutional obligation to govern or help govern, right? And that's crap. There's nowhere in the Constitution or anywhere else that says the minority party or the Republican Party or the Conservative Party just gets to kick back for however long during their term and thwart any and all progress. But that's exactly how they look at it. So no matter what happens today with Kevin McCarthy, and hopefully he's being humiliated as we speak, that's good. There's a lot of schadenfreude there. I encourage you to feel it as well. I would also encourage you to look down with contempt and disdain on views that are espoused here like those of Ben Shapiro.